Hi guys, and welcome to the channel. Thanks for joining, thanks for subscribing if you are going to subscribe. If you like this kind of video, please consider doing so. So yeah, putting the paint where it belongs, that is the whole idea behind this. And I've just got some MDF board here which I'm sanding with some 220 grit sandpaper. That's so that I can give the primer some tooth just to bite onto. I'm using a sponge roller here and I'm layering the primer on quite thickly, as you can see. And I give this 3 coats, and as you roll it on it creates little bubbles, but if you just let it dry for a minute or so and then you gently pull the roller over, it flattens it. And it gives you this kind of texture, which I call sort of an eggshell texture, which in the final painting is quite a nice texture to have. So we start off as usual by projecting the image onto the canvas, making sure the projector is squared up to the canvas, and just tracing all the bits and pieces that I need. And there are various ways of masking up something like this. You could use some frisket. Here I'm just using some fine line tape that you can get at the auto repair shop or the paint store. It's nice and flexible, doesn't stick too much, so there's no fear of pulling off your primer or anything else. Even over the airbrushed work it works quite well, you'll see a little later. So I'm just trying to follow the curve as close as I can. And fixing any mistakes as I go along. After this I'm going to just mask up with some masking tape. This also doesn't stick too badly, so again no fear of pulling off your paint. I did try some blue painter's tape, but that is actually more sticky than normal masking tape, so this works pretty well for me. I just cut a little template into this piece of paper for the iris, which I'm just going to block in quickly. You can see my paint is fairly thin, because I like to build it up. I don't want to overdo it in one go. So whether I do 2 or 10 passes makes no difference to me whatsoever. I did get some overspray there, you can see on the iris, but with our blending and blocking and shading, that'll disappear. I'm not too worried about that. So the first step in doing this, there are obviously many ways to do this, but I decided to shade the shadows in first and then paint the white bits on over the top. You could also do it the other way around, paint the white bits first and then, or paint the black shading first, leaving the white. But I decided to do it this way. So either way will work. So I just have the finished painting on the side so we can see what we're working towards. So now I'm coming in and I'm just blocking in the white parts. And once again my paint is fairly thin, so I can go over it a few times using the fact that the paint is thin to add more dimension. Here I'm just coming in, I'm just fixing some of the shading because the white obviously was a bit too pure, so I just need to fix a little bit of that here and there. And now I'm just creating a slight little blur around the iris. We don't want it too sharp, so I'm just using the negative stencil. And using the negative stencil, I'm spraying mostly on that and letting the overspray create the soft transition. My pressure is at about 20 psi. I'm not too worried about the overspray on top of the eye because that's where the eyelashes will go and it'll get pretty dark there anyway. So now I'm doing the highlight, so I'm just using a stencil that are 3D printed. You can cut one out of paper just to create that highlight reflection. And also with a very soft airbrush, I'm using my 0.2mm detail brush here just to create a bit of just to create that highlight. I decided just to mask up that little corner there to help me. And once again, the paint is very thin, so that I can build it up. Now I'm just adding some details in. These are actually reflections of the eyelashes. And here I'm just reshading some of the parts inside the iris to create just that sense of depth and layering, so that the white parts, those white lines, seem to be higher than the other parts. Just following where the light is coming from to create the shade in the other direction, on the right side, I should say. Painting in some fine details. Also, the paint is very watered down, so that I don't do it all in one go. I can go back and do it a few times. Sometimes it takes me a week or two to decide which painting I'm going to commit to, because it's quite a commitment to spend all this time on such a large canvas and then decide, oh, I should have painted the other one. So I had a choice of about 10 images I wanted to do, and I'll probably still do one or two of them. But yeah, that's always a process I go through. Whilst editing these videos, I start looking for the next one. Here I'm just coming with a very watered down blue wash. I could have airbrushed this in, but I wanted to take my time and get it just in the right place. Of course, an airbrush will do exactly the same thing, but I thought, well, let me use this technique. It's as good as the airbrush in this particular case. And I think I even come in with the airbrush a little later just to soften some of the transitions. And this is just a glazing technique, and I watered the blue down to at least 90%. So 10% paint, 90%, even 95% water, which is distilled water with some alcohol. And it's got I don't have any issues with adhesion or the paint peeling off or anything like that. So don't let anybody tell you that you can't water down acrylic paints. You certainly can. Here I'm just creating a little bit of a blue highlight again, the same technique as we used for the previous part. And you can actually see how thin this paint really is when I spray it on the white. It's just barely there. But this gives me ample opportunity to build it up, go in a few times until I'm happy, without the fear of overdoing it in one go. I'm by no means suggesting that this is the way to paint an eye, or to do any painting in fact. There are hundreds of different methods, but this is the one that seems to work for me. Even in my previous paintings I tend to do pretty much the same thing, and I'm quite happy with the results. We're going to come and highlight again some of the white parts now with a white wash, which is again very watered down white paint. It goes on looking quite bright, but as it dries it pulls back a bit, giving you once again lots of opportunity to build it up just where you need to, without the fear of putting on too much paint in one go. But you can see that it's taking shape. If you look at the reference or the final image at the back, you can see what we're working towards. And it's just a matter of taking time and putting in as much detail as you want, or you need, or you feel the need to put in. Just speeding through this a little bit for you so you can just see it building up. And sometimes I use my finger just to blot out or smudge it a bit. So we're moving on to the eyelid now, and just using a big template that I cut out. Just blocking in some of the shapes. I did mask up the eye because I didn't want any overspray there at all. So I'm just referring to my source image to see where it needs to go darker, using my finger as a bit of a barrier for a very soft edge, because a template there would just be too harsh, but if you put your finger there, it makes a nice soft transition. And it's only acrylic paint, so that'll just wash right off. I'm not too worried about that black spot on the top of the eye there, because that's going to be very dark by the time we're finished. And here in fact I'm busy shading that in at the moment, so you can see it completely disappears, and we'll still be putting the eyelashes over the top. So moving on to the tear duct, once again using the O2 airbrush. And a couple of stencils, just some freehand stencils, nothing fancy, just to block that in. And using the skin tone, I just shaded the eye slightly, and now I'm using the same color as I did for the top of the eyelid to add some red. Moving on to the eyebrows, just block that in generally, and then just used quite a big brush. And moving on to the eyelashes, you can see how thin the paint is, because I don't mind going over it 2 or 3 times until I have it just in the right place and just the right length. I'm not in a hurry to finish this, so just very gently with my liner brush going over the pencil marks where I had previously drawn them. I realized later that these were way too short, because I'm working so close to the painting I completely misjudged the size of everything. So after standing back I realized that they were way too small, so I did go in later and I fixed the length. And that's the problem with working on something so large at such a close range. The sense of size seems to just disappear. I'm trying my little electric eraser here to pull out some of the highlights, and I did this for a bit but realized that the canvas just wasn't quite smooth enough for this technique. It will work if the canvas is like paper, then you'll have no problems. I just later on went in with a white brush and redid all of those. I do mix a little bit of orange, 1 or 2 drops of orange into my white container, and that prevents the blue shift when you paint white over black. It tends to have a bit of a blue shift. So here we're doing the top eyelashes. So that's basically the eye done, guys. Please join me in part 2. And I hope that you subscribe and you like this sort of thing. I've cut the video down into a few sections, otherwise it's too long and there's a lot of information here. So please like, subscribe, and join in the conversation. And we hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.